Imagine stepping into a city where the salty breeze from the Mediterranean mingles with the scent of papyrus and old parchment. The streets are alive with traders, travelers, and scholars from every corner of the known world. Now, picture a place in this city where all the knowledge collected from distant lands, from the philosophers of Greece to the astronomers of Babylon, is gathered under a single magnificent roof. This is Alexandria, over 2,000 years ago, when the world was still young and full of mystery. In the heart of this bustling city stood a sanctuary of wisdom unlike anything the world had ever seen. People called it the Library of Alexandria, and even today, its name is whispered with a sense of awe, as if it were a legend more than a real place. Let's pause for a moment and really think about this. Imagine a building so grand, so important, that its destruction still echoes through history. People dreamed, debated, and discovered within its halls. But who was behind this legendary creation? Why did they want to gather all the world's knowledge in one place? And how could something so precious simply vanish from the face of the earth? Come with me, and let's travel back to ancient Egypt, when the Ptolemaic dynasty ruled the land. It was a time of great hope, ambition, and curiosity. The library was more than just a collection of scrolls. It was the beating heart of human discovery, where ideas flowed like the Nile, and the search for truth brought people together from every culture and background. Did you know that every ship arriving at Alexandria's port was carefully searched for books? If any were found, they were copied by the library's scribes. The original would stay in the library, and the owner would receive a copy. This is just one of many fascinating secrets we'll uncover about this wonder of the ancient world. If stories like this make your heart race with curiosity, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires so we can keep exploring these incredible chapters of our shared past together. The journey is just beginning. Picture this. You're standing on the bustling docks of ancient Alexandria in the 3rd century before Christ, and you witness something absolutely extraordinary. A merchant ship has just arrived from Athens, loaded with precious cargo. But here's the twist. The harbor officials aren't just interested in the silk, spices, or gold aboard that vessel. They're hunting for something far more valuable: books. This wasn't some random inspection. This was Alexandria's brilliant strategy to become the intellectual center of the entire known world. Every single scroll, every piece of written knowledge that entered their port was carefully examined, copied by skilled scribes, and then, here's the fascinating part, the original stayed in Alexandria while the copy went back to the ship's owner. Imagine being a traveling scholar and discovering that your precious manuscript had just become part of the greatest library ever built. But let's step back and understand how this incredible place came to be. When Alexander the Great founded Alexandria around 332 before Christ, he probably never imagined that this Egyptian coastal city would one day house the accumulated wisdom of the ancient world. After Alexander's death, his general Ptolemy became the ruler of Egypt, and this ambitious leader had a vision that would change history forever. Ptolemy I didn't just want to rule Egypt. He wanted to make it the beating heart of human knowledge. So he created something unprecedented, the Mouseion, which means the Temple of the Muses. Now, this wasn't just a library in the way we think of libraries today. Picture instead a magnificent research campus where the brightest minds of the ancient world lived, worked, and debated under royal protection. Think of it as the world's first university, complete with dormitories, dining halls, lecture rooms, and gardens where scholars could walk and ponder the mysteries of the universe. The government provided everything: food, lodging, and most importantly, access to an ever-growing collection of texts that would eventually number in the hundreds of thousands. The Ptolemies were absolutely obsessed with collecting knowledge, and they employed some remarkably clever tactics to build their collection. Here's one story that perfectly captures their determination. Ptolemy III once borrowed the original manuscripts of the great Greek tragedies by Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides from Athens. These were priceless cultural treasures, and Athens demanded an enormous deposit, 15 talents of silver, which was roughly equivalent to the cost of building several warships. Athens agreed to lend the manuscripts, confident that no one would forfeit such a massive sum. But Ptolemy had other plans. He kept the originals for his library, sent back beautifully crafted copies to Athens, and simply wrote off the deposit as the price of acquiring irreplaceable texts. It was highway robbery, but it was robbery in the service of preserving human knowledge. The scale of what they achieved was breathtaking. Ships didn't just come from around the Mediterranean. They arrived from India carrying Sanskrit texts, from Babylon with astronomical observations, from the far reaches of Africa with medical knowledge that existed nowhere else. Every piece of writing that entered Alexandria became part of this growing treasure trove of human understanding. And here's something that might surprise you. The scholars working in the Mausion weren't just bookworms copying old texts. They were conducting cutting-edge research that wouldn't be matched for over 1,000 years. While living and working in this intellectual paradise, they were measuring the size of the Earth, mapping the stars, performing surgical procedures, and developing mathematical principles that we still use today. The atmosphere must have been electric. Imagine walking through those halls and overhearing a conversation between a mathematician from Sicily and a physician from India, or watching an astronomer from Babylon explain the movement of planets to a group of fascinated colleagues from across the known world. Knowledge flowed freely, ideas collided and combined, and human understanding advanced at a pace that wouldn't be seen again until the Renaissance. This wasn't just a collection of books. It was a living, breathing center of human curiosity where the greatest minds of the ancient world came together to push the boundaries of what was possible to know and understand about our world. Now, let me tell you about what was actually inside this incredible place, because the numbers alone will leave you speechless. Picture walking into a hall that contained over 700,000 scrolls. To put that in perspective, if you tried to read just one scroll per day, it would take you nearly 2,000 years to get through the entire collection. This wasn't just a library, it was the memory of human civilization itself, carefully preserved on papyrus and parchment. But here's what makes it even more remarkable. These weren't just random collections of stories or basic information. We're talking about the most advanced knowledge of the ancient world. Within these walls, you could find detailed medical procedures that surgeons were performing in ancient India, astronomical calculations from Babylonian observers who had been tracking the stars for centuries, and philosophical texts from Greek thinkers who were asking questions that we're still trying to answer today. And the scholars who worked there? They weren't just librarians. They were the greatest minds of their time, and they were actively creating new knowledge. Let me tell you about some of the incredible discoveries that happened right there in Alexandria. There was Euclid, a mathematician whose work was so brilliant that we still teach his geometry in schools today, more than 2,000 years later. While living and working in the Mausion, he wrote his famous Elements, a collection of mathematical principles that became the foundation of geometry as we know it. Imagine sitting in one of those reading rooms, watching him work out proofs and theorems that would shape human understanding of mathematics forever. Then there was Eratosthenes, and his story is absolutely mind-blowing. This brilliant scholar figured out how to measure the entire Earth using nothing more than shadows, basic geometry, and incredible ingenuity. He noticed that at noon on the summer solstice in the city of Siena, which is modern-day Aswan, the sun shone directly down into deep wells without casting any shadows. But in Alexandria, which was about 500 miles north, vertical objects cast clear shadows at exactly the same time. Using this observation and some mathematical calculations, he determined that the Earth's circumference was approximately 25,000 miles. His answer was remarkably close to what we know today using modern technology. Think about that for a moment. While most people in the ancient world believed the Earth was flat, this scholar in Alexandria had not only proven it was round, but had actually measured its size. And then there was Archimedes, the legendary inventor and mathematician. While visiting Alexandria and working with the scholars there, he developed some of his most famous inventions and mathematical principles. He created the Archimedes screw, a device for moving water uphill that's still used in some parts of the world today. He discovered the principle of buoyancy. You know, the famous story about shouting "Eureka" when he figured out why objects float or sink. But here's something that might surprise you even more than these famous discoveries. The library contained knowledge that has been completely lost to history. There were works by Homer that we'll never read. Not just the Iliad and Odyssey that survived, but other epic poems that existed nowhere else in the world. When Alexandria's collection was eventually destroyed, these works vanished forever. The library also housed incredibly detailed astronomical observations from Babylon, where scholars had been tracking the movements of planets and stars for over 1,000 years. These ancient astronomers had developed mathematical models for predicting eclipses and planetary positions that were astonishingly accurate. Much of this knowledge existed only in Alexandria's collection. There were medical texts from ancient India describing surgical procedures that European doctors wouldn't rediscover until the Renaissance. There were works of natural philosophy from Egypt that contained detailed observations about the flooding of the Nile and the behavior of various animals. There were historical chronicles from civilizations across Africa and Asia that provided perspectives on ancient events that we'll never be able to recover. Perhaps most heartbreaking of all, there were likely hundreds of works by female scholars and writers whose contributions to human knowledge have been completely erased from history. The ancient world produced brilliant women thinkers, but because their works were often less likely to be copied and preserved, many survived only in Alexandria's comprehensive collection. The scholars working in the Mausoleum weren't just preserving this knowledge, they were actively building upon it, combining insights from different cultures and creating new understanding. A mathematician from Greece might collaborate with an astronomer from Babylon and a physician from Egypt, sharing techniques and perspectives that led to breakthrough discoveries. This cross-pollination of ideas was absolutely revolutionary. For the first time in human history, scholars had access to the collected wisdom of multiple civilizations, all in one place. They could compare different approaches to the same problems, test ancient theories against new observations, and push the boundaries of human understanding in ways that had never been possible before. The atmosphere of intellectual excitement must have been incredible. These weren't just people reading dusty old scrolls. They were engaged in active research, heated debates, and groundbreaking discoveries that were expanding the frontiers of human knowledge every single day. Are you fascinated by this ancient legacy? Then comment your thoughts, like the video, share it with fellow history lovers, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires for more epic journeys. But here's where our story takes a heartbreaking turn, and it's more complicated than most people realize. You've probably heard that Julius Caesar burned down the Library of Alexandria, or maybe that it was destroyed by Christian mobs, or perhaps that Muslim conquerors wiped it out. The truth is far more complex and, in many ways, even more tragic than any single dramatic event. Let me paint you a picture of what really happened, because understanding the slow death of this incredible institution tells us something profound about how civilizations rise and fall and how easily human knowledge can slip away. The first major blow came in 48 before Christ, during one of the most tense moments in Roman history. Julius Caesar had pursued his rival Pompey to Alexandria, and he found himself trapped in the royal palace with Cleopatra. The situation was desperate. They were vastly outnumbered and surrounded by hostile forces. In a moment of tactical desperation, Caesar ordered his own ships to be set ablaze to prevent them from falling into enemy hands. Now, here's what makes this moment so tragic. Those flames didn't stay contained to the harbor. Fire in ancient cities was an unstoppable force, and the blaze spread through parts of Alexandria, reaching some of the warehouse areas where scrolls were stored. But here's the thing that might surprise you. This wasn't the complete destruction that many people imagine. The main library complex, the Mausoleum itself, likely survived this incident relatively intact, but something more insidious was already happening. The golden age of Alexandria was slowly coming to an end. The Ptolemaic dynasty was weakening, and as Roman influence grew stronger, the funding and support for scholarly work began to decline. Imagine being one of those brilliant researchers, watching as fewer and fewer resources were allocated to copying and preserving manuscripts, seeing positions go unfilled when respected scholars retired or died. The library didn't die in a single moment of flames. It died slowly, like a garden that's no longer tended. Scrolls made from papyrus don't last forever, especially in Egypt's climate. Without constant copying and recopying, even the most precious texts would eventually crumble into dust. And as political priorities shifted and economic troubles mounted, this essential work of preservation became less and less of a priority. By the 4th century after Christ, Christianity had become the dominant religion of the Roman Empire, and this brought new challenges for the library. Some Christian leaders viewed the pagan philosophical and religious texts with suspicion. In 391 after Christ, there were indeed riots in Alexandria, and the magnificent Temple of Serapis, which housed part of the library's collection, was destroyed by a Christian mob led by the patriarch Theophilus. But even this wasn't the end of the story. Some scholars believe that portions of the collection survived, scattered among various smaller libraries and private collections throughout the city. The final chapter may have come with the Arab conquest of Alexandria in 642 after Christ, though here too the historical record is frustratingly unclear. What we do know for certain is that by the 7th century, the great Library of Alexandria, that magnificent center of learning that had preserved and advanced human knowledge for nearly 1,000 years, was gone, and with it, disappeared treasures of human understanding that we can barely imagine. Think about what was lost forever in this slow decline. There were the complete works of Aristotle, not just the texts that survived in medieval Europe, but hundreds of additional writings on topics ranging from biology to politics. Imagine the scientific breakthroughs and philosophical insights contained in those lost works. There were detailed medical texts from ancient India that described surgical procedures and treatments that European doctors wouldn't rediscover for more than 1,000 years. There were astronomical observations from Babylon that represented centuries of careful sky-watching mathematical calculations that could have accelerated our understanding of the cosmos by centuries. Perhaps most heartbreaking of all, there were countless works by authors whose names we'll never even know. Poets, historians, scientists, and philosophers whose contributions to human understanding vanished without a trace. There were stories that could have enriched our literature, scientific observations that could have advanced our knowledge, and historical accounts that could have given us deeper insights into ancient civilizations. Some historians estimate that we've lost roughly 90% of all ancient Greek literature, and much of what survived did so only because it had been copied and preserved in the Library of Alexandria before being transmitted to other collections. When we consider what disappeared with the library itself, we begin to understand that we're looking at one of the greatest intellectual losses in human history. But here's what makes this story even more poignant. It wasn't inevitable. The library didn't have to die. With adequate funding, political support, and cultural prioritization, it could have continued to serve as a beacon of learning for centuries more. The knowledge wasn't destroyed by natural disaster or some unstoppable force. It was lost through human choices, through shifting priorities and changing values. The decline of the Library of Alexandria serves as a sobering reminder that knowledge, no matter how vast or precious, is fragile. It requires constant care, continuous support, and unwavering commitment to preserve and transmit to future generations. When societies stop investing in learning and scholarship, when they prioritize other concerns over the preservation of knowledge, irreplaceable treasures of human understanding can slip away forever. And so the greatest library in human history didn't end with a bang, but with a whimper, slowly fading away as the world around it changed, taking with it secrets and wisdom that we're still trying to recover more than 1,500 years later. When we look back at the story of the Library of Alexandria, we're not just looking at the rise and fall of a single institution. We're witnessing something much more profound, the birth and death of humanity's first truly universal dream of knowledge. Think about what those ancient scholars in Alexandria were really trying to do. They weren't just collecting scrolls for the sake of having impressive numbers. They were pursuing something that had never been attempted before in human history, gathering all of human understanding in one place, making it accessible to anyone who sought wisdom, regardless of where they came from or what language they spoke. This was revolutionary thinking for its time. In most ancient civilizations, knowledge was hoarded, kept secret by priests, guarded by rulers, or limited to small circles of the elite. But Alexandria represented a completely different vision. Here was a place where a scholar from Greece could learn from the medical traditions of India, where an astronomer from Babylon could share discoveries with a mathematician from Egypt, where the wisdom of different cultures could meet, mingle, and create something entirely new. In many ways, the Library of Alexandria was humanity's first attempt at what we might recognize today as global collaboration in the pursuit of knowledge. It was like an ancient version of the internet, a place where information flowed freely across cultural and geographical boundaries, where ideas could spread and evolve through contact with other ideas. And here's what makes its loss so deeply meaningful for us today. The library didn't fail because the dream was impossible. It failed because people stopped believing in that dream. They stopped investing in it, stopped protecting it, stopped seeing the value in preserving and sharing knowledge across different communities and traditions. But imagine for a moment if things had gone differently. What if the Library of Alexandria had survived? What if that tradition of collecting, preserving, and sharing knowledge had continued unbroken through the centuries? Consider how much faster human progress might have been. The scientific revolution that began in Europe during the 16th century might have happened 1,000 years earlier. Medical knowledge from ancient India, astronomical observations from Babylon, and mathematical insights from Greece could have continued to build upon each other generation after generation. We might have avoided what historians call the Dark Ages entirely. Instead of losing so much ancient knowledge and having to rediscover it centuries later, human understanding could have grown continuously, building upon the foundations that Alexandria had already established. Think about the diseases that could have been cured earlier, the technologies that could have been developed sooner, the philosophical and scientific questions that could have been explored more deeply. The loss of Alexandria may have set back human progress by centuries, maybe even a millennium. But perhaps even more importantly, if Alexandria had survived, we might have developed a completely different relationship with knowledge itself. Instead of the pattern we see throughout history, where different cultures develop in isolation, often viewing other traditions with suspicion, we might have grown up with the understanding that wisdom belongs to all humanity, that knowledge grows stronger when it's shared rather than hoarded. The scholars of Alexandria understood something that we're still struggling to fully grasp in our modern world. That the greatest discoveries happen when different perspectives meet, when diverse traditions of thinking come together to tackle common challenges. Yet here's the beautiful thing about the legacy of Alexandria. Even though the physical library is gone, the dream it represented never really died. Every university, every public library, every online database where knowledge is freely shared is, in some way, a descendant of that ancient vision. When we see international scientific collaborations working together to solve global problems, when we watch researchers from different countries and cultures sharing their discoveries openly, when we use the internet to access information from around the world, we're participating in the same dream that drove the Ptolemies to build their great library over 2,000 years ago. The story of Alexandria teaches us that knowledge is not just information, it's hope. It's the belief that by understanding our world better, by learning from each other's experiences and insights, we can build something greater than what any of us could achieve alone. But it also teaches us that this hope is fragile. The dream of shared knowledge doesn't sustain itself automatically. It requires constant care, continuous investment, and most importantly, People who believe deeply in its value and are willing to protect it even when times get tough. Every time we choose to support education, every time we make knowledge freely available, every time we choose curiosity over fear in our interactions with other cultures and traditions, we're keeping alive the spirit of Alexandria. We're saying that the dream those ancient scholars pursued, the dream of knowledge that unites rather than divides humanity, is still worth fighting for. The Library of Alexandria may be gone, but the question it poses to each generation remains as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. Will we choose to share what we know and learn from each other? Or will we allow wisdom to be scattered and lost? Will we invest in the preservation and growth of human understanding? Or will we let short-term concerns overshadow our long-term commitment to knowledge? In our age of rapid technological change and global challenges, the example of Alexandria reminds us that our greatest achievements come not from competing with each other, but from combining our different strengths and perspectives in the pursuit of understanding. The scrolls may have crumbled to dust, the buildings may have fallen to ruins, but the idea that inspired the Library of Alexandria, that knowledge belongs to all humanity and grows strongest when it's shared, that idea remains as powerful and as necessary today as it ever was. Perhaps that's the most important lesson Alexandria teaches us, that while civilizations rise and fall, while empires come and go, the human hunger for knowledge and understanding is eternal. And if we're wise, if we learn from both Alexandria's triumphs and its ultimate fate, we can ensure that this hunger continues to be fed, and that the wisdom we discover today will be there for future generations to build upon, just as we've built upon the foundations that those ancient scholars laid so long ago. What lessons can we draw from this ancient tradition? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires for more untold stories of the ancient world.